Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Two Goals and a Crime. I'm Dez,
And I'm Mac.
and today we're going to be talking about the alphabet murders that occurred in 1971 to 1973. Just a little bit of a trigger warning. This case does involve rape and it involves children. So if this isn't one that's for you and it's just a little bit too heavy, we completely understand. But yeah, so just wanted to give a little heads up before we dive into the case. So, who was Carmen Cullen, the first victim? Carmen Cullen was a 10-year-old Puerto Rican girl who spoke little English. She lived with her grandparents in Rochester. She was known to run errands around the neighborhood for her grandfather, Felix. At around 4:20 p.m. on November 16th, 1971, Carmen's mother or grandmother had sent her to the local drugstore to pick up a prescription for her grandfather. She walked 2 blocks to the pharmacy on West Main Street and spoke to the pharmacist. Carmen left the store after learning that the prescription was not ready yet, telling the store owner, Jack Corbin, "I got to go. I gotta go." She was then observed entering a car parked close to the pharmacy. Carmen was reported missing to the Rochester Police Department at 7:50 p.m. Carmen was last seen approximately 50 minutes later on Route 490, which is about 12 miles, so 19 kilometers, from her neighborhood. A number of motorists, I just hate this part, sorry. A number of motorists say she was naked from the waist down, waving her arms, shouting and running away from a car that was reversing on the shoulder of the road.
I
The
just, I,
vehicle,
mm, I don't understand.
yeah, this part is like heavy and it just pains to read. Yeah. The vehicle was believed to be a dark colored Ford Pinto hatchback. At least one of these witnesses observed sorry. Just this part is hard to read. Okay. At least one of these witnesses observed Colin being submissively led back to the vehicle by her abductor. Would you believe it? Nobody stopped. People told us they were going too fast. They were in a hurry to get home. Police Captain Andrew, I believe Sporacino is how you say his last name, told the New York Times in 1973. This is also why I said that this part is just hard to read because just that nobody stopped is just really hard to read
I
that you
just,
saw that.
I
And
don't
it's just,
understand.
yeah. And I have to just say that while reading this because it's just so saddening to read.
Yeah, like the way that would sit on my conscience forever.
Yeah, it's just hard. So I just had to say that a little bit. So 2 days later, two teenage boys riding bicycles near Churchville, about 12 miles, 19 kilometers, from Interstate 490 and 35 miles, 56 kilometers, southwest of Rochester, made a chilling discovery. In a roadside ditch, they came across what they initially thought was a broken doll, only to realize it was the lifeless, partially clothed body of a young girl. Her coat was found in a culvert approximately 300 feet from where her body was discovered. On November 30th, her trousers were located near the service road, close to the spot where motorists had reported seeing her trying to escape. An autopsy later revealed horrifying details. Trigger warning just again. She had been raped, suffered a fracture to her skull and one of her vertebrae, all before being manually strangled to death. Furthermore, her body had been extensively scratched by fingernails. Both the murder of Carmen and the fact that not a single person who observed the child attempting to flee her abductor alongside Interstate 490 had been attempted to offer her any assistance generated intense public outrage. Two New York newspapers, Times Union and the Democrat and Chronicle, initially offered a combined reward of $2,500 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of her murderer. And all information each publication received was relayed to the police. Numerous local businesses and residents added private donations to the reward fund, gradually increasing the sum to over $6,000. Although police interrogated several suspects in the months following, including her uncle, nobody was charged with her murder, and by December 21st, the number of investigators assigned to the case was decreased to 3. In early 1972, 5 large billboards, each measuring 30 by 12 feet, were put up alongside major Rochester expressways. Billboard reads, "Do you know who killed Carmen Collin? Please help before it happens again. Rewards for information total 6 grand. Be a secret witness. No clue is too small. Citizens for a decent community. Your identity will be kept secret." Although this tactic generated several news leads, the case remained open.
So, what are the alphabet murders? From 1971 to 1973, Carmen Colon, Wanda Wolkowitz, and Michelle Mainza were each separately abducted, strangled, sexually assaulted, and dumped in brushy embankments near busy roads outside of Rochester, New York. In a strange twist that nobody saw coming, police believe the victims were stalked and chosen for their matching twin initials. Where the bodies were found also matched their initials: Colon in Churchville, Wolkowitz in Webster, and Mainza in Macedon. Macedon?
I think
Macedon.
so. Yeah.
This inspired the names of the alphabet murders or double digit murders. The 3 girls shared more than just matching double initials. All 3 came from financially struggling families with absent or deceased fathers. They were Catholic, had some trouble making friends in school, and one was believed to have learning disabilities. They were all just blocks from their homes when they disappeared. The second victim is Wanda Wolkowitz. For over a year, police looked for Carmen Colin's killer, and then, 17 months later, the murder of a second girl indicated a possible motive. Wanda Wolkowitz was 11 years old at the time of her death. Rita DeCan told the Democrat and Chronicle that her older sister was a tomboy with red hair and weighing 65 pounds. She often helped her mother with tasks like purchasing groceries for dinner, as their father had died of a heart attack years earlier. On April 2nd, 1973, Wanda walked to the grocery store by herself on the east side of Rochester around 5 p.m. Wanda bought groceries nearby and started to walk north on Conkey Avenue, according to the deli owner. A witness spotted her near the market about an hour later, holding her groceries and hesitating at the door of a stopped car. Wanda was reported missing by her mother, Joyce, at approximately 8 p.m. Police immediately launched an intense search to locate Wanda. Almost 50 detectives searched several square miles of the terrain around her home, the deli, and areas around the Genesee River where she had been known to play. These searches failed to locate the child, although several neighborhood residents recalled observing Wanda struggling to carry the bag of groceries, walking just north of Avenue B. 3 classmates specifically observed her bracing the bag against a fence so that she could improve her grip as a brown vehicle drove past her. The next day at 10:15 a.m., a New York State trooper found her fully clothed dead body at the bottom of a hillside. This was at a rest area off of State Route 104 in Webster, which is about 7 miles or 11 kilometers northeast of her home. The position of her body indicated that she had likely been thrown from a moving vehicle with her body rolling down the embankment. Trigger warning again. The autopsy showed that Wanda had been sexually assaulted, then strangled from behind with what was likely a belt. Several defensive wounds indicated Wanda had fought her murderer. In addition, her body had been redressed after death. The autopsy also revealed traces of semen and pubic hair on the child's body. Furthermore, several strands of white cat fur were found upon her clothing, but Wanda's family didn't have any pets with this color of fur. Andrew Sparacino, police captain at the time, said he believed the killer had a car and the girls entered it willingly. He's quoted saying, "The lure dangled before the children may have been the offer of a hamburger and a soft drink." To add to the spooky levels of this case, um, not spook, just fucked up, really.
Yeah.
An unknown visitor had been cleaning her gravestone and placing flowers.
Mm. That's never sat right with me reading this case.
The two crimes looked shockingly similar. Both Walkowitz and Colin vanished in the afternoon. Both had been strangled and raped. As had been the case of Carmen Colin, investigators established an anonymous tip line in addition to distributing numerous flyers throughout Rochester appealing for information. A reward of $10,000 was also established. As fear swept through the Rochester community, police searched for suspects. Reports poured in, and an eyewitness informed investigators that he observed Wanda walking home from the deli on the evening of April 2nd and saw her standing alongside the passenger door of a large brown vehicle. Another individual informed investigators she had observed a man forcing a red haired girl matching Wanda's description into a light colored Dodge Dart on Conkey Avenue between 5:30 and 6 p.m. on the evening of her disappearance. The Rochester Police Department actually dismissed any suggestion of there being a link between the two cases, which is ironic or weird.
It's
Not ironic. Why am I saying the wrong words today? Oh,
it's wrong of them to dismiss any possibilities. I get it's two victims, but it's not just two victims. It's two young victims. So nothing should have been dismissed.
in September 1973, local television networks announced plans to broadcast a televised reconstruction of Wanda's abduction and the recovery of her body. It was a 30-minute episode that aired on October 21st, 1973, and was accompanied by public appeals for eyewitnesses to contact authorities. The Rochester Police Department, or RPD, received over 200 calls from the public, but the leads were not useful. Was a killer in Rochester targeting girls with the same first and last initial?
A third victim is killed and the police remain baffled. Michelle Menza. 7 months after Wanda went missing, on November 26th, 1973, 11-year-old Michelle Menza was reported missing by her mother, Carolyn, after she failed to return home from school. Michelle was last seen by her classmates at approximately 3:20 p.m., walking alone and headed in the direction of a shopping plaza that was located close to her school. Her intentions had been to retrieve her mother's purse that her mom had left inside a store in the plaza earlier that day. Around 10 minutes later, a witness observed Michelle sitting in the passenger seat of a beige or tan vehicle traveling at high speed on Ackerman Street, I believe, turning onto Webster Avenue. According to this witness, Michelle had been crying. Police also received a tip that a girl who looked like Michelle was spotted at a fast food restaurant in a man's car in the town of Penfield at approximately 4:30 p.m. on the afternoon of her disappearance. The witness said the man had dirty hands and returned to the car carrying a bag and a cup. Witnesses told the police what the man looked like, providing the first description of a possible suspect. Michelle was last seen in the company of a Caucasian male with dark hair, aged between 25 and 35, approximately 6 feet, so 183 centimeters tall, and weighing around 165 pounds. An hour later at 5:30 p.m., a motorist had observed a man standing by a large beige or tan vehicle with a flat tire, parked alongside Route 350 in the town of Walworth, hooding a girl he strongly believed to be Michelle Menza by the wrist. When this person had stopped to offer assistance, the individual had deliberately grabbed the girl and pushed her behind his back, also obscuring his license plate from view, as he stared in his direction with such a menacing expression on his face that the motorist had felt compelled to leave. Menza's fully clothed body was discovered at 10:30 a.m. on November 28th, lying face down in a ditch alongside a rural road in Mayston.
Macedon? I don't know.
One of those.
Yeah, just run with it.
Approximately, yeah, approximately 15 miles, 24 kilometers from Rochester. Her autopsy revealed that in addition to receiving extensive blunt force trauma to her body, Mainza had been, trigger warning, raped, then strangled to death from behind with possibly a thin rope. Numerous strands of white cat fur were discovered on her clothing, and leaf samples matching foliage where her body was discovered were recovered from within one of her clenched hands, indicating she had likely been strangled to death at or near the location where she was found. Investigators were able to retrieve a partial palm print from her neck and traces of semen on her body and underwear. A forensic analysis of the semen samples determined she had been raped by one person. An analysis of the contents of Mainza's stomach revealed traces of a hamburger and onions, which had been consumed approximately 1 hour before her murder. This gave credence to the tip earlier of a girl being seen at a fast food restaurant and an hour later alongside Route 350. So, going into a little bit of the investigation, which is not very long, just to keep in mind.
Because it's still ongoing.
Yeah, it's still a very open case. So, all three of the child murders generated intense public outrage and each received intense publicity following the murder of Michelle Mainza. Investigators released a composite drawing of the individual seen with the child to the media. A hotline was set up that was exclusively devoted to the manhunt of the perpetrator, who they strongly suspected committed all three murders. Although these efforts resulted in numerous calls from the public, no credible suspect was unfortunately located. Investigators interrogated more than 800 individual suspects. That's a lot of people. In relation to the murders, the perp or perps of the homicides, they were never caught, and the case remains unsolved, unfortunately.
So, to go into some of the suspects that were investigated during the case, the first is Miguel Colon, which is Carmen Colon's paternal uncle. He apparently formed a relationship with Carmen's mother. I'm not quite sure how to say her name, so yeah.
I don't even want to attempt it.
Nope,
I
I
don't want
don't.
to butcher it
Well,
and be disrespectful.
yeah. This was after her parents had separated. Carmen typically walked to the pharmacy for her grandfather Felix, or sorry, with her grandfather Felix, but on the day of her disappearance, she convinced her grandparents to let her go alone. Shortly before Carmen's abduction and murder, Miguel purchased a car resembling the one witnesses saw reversing on Interstate 490 in pursuit of Carmen. Investigators found the car extensively cleaned, with the trunk washed using a strong cleaning solution, something that was not done by the dealership before its sale. A doll belonging to Carmen was also found in the vehicle, but family members noted that she often rode with Miguel and may have left it behind on one of those rides. 2 days after Carmen's murder, Miguel reportedly told a friend that he intended to leave the country because he had, quote, done something wrong in Rochester. 4 days later, he relocated to Puerto Rico. In March 1972, investigators traveled to San Juan to question him, but the news ended up leaking their intentions, which caused Miguel to flee. He eventually surrendered on March 26th and agreed to return to Rochester for questioning. Miguel failed to provide a credible alibi for the day of Carmen's murder, and no witnesses could verify his claims. While strong circumstantial evidence suggested his involvement, no physical evidence linked him to the crime scene or his vehicle. Miguel died by suicide at age 44 following a domestic violence incident where he injured his wife and brother.
Jeez.
So, a lot of circumstantial evidence there, but
Nothing concrete enough,
And obviously,
unfortunately.
he's passed away, so they can't test
Yeah.
DNA. The next suspect was Dennis Termini. He was a 25-year-old firefighter in Rochester. He was a prolific serial offender, known as the garage rapist, who is known to have committed a minimum of 14 rapes of teenage girls and young women between 1971 and 1973. He owned a beige vehicle similar to the description observed by eyewitnesses. He also lived close to the area where Michelle Mainza was last seen alive. 5 weeks after the death of Michelle, on January 1st, 1974, Dennis attempted to abduct a teenage girl at gunpoint, although he fled the scene when the teenager wouldn't stop screaming. Shortly after, he abducted another potential victim, but on this occasion, he was pursued by police, resulting in Termini committing suicide by shooting himself in the head. Forensic examination of Termini's vehicle revealed traces of white cat fur on the upholstery. In January 2007, Termini's body was exhumed to obtain a DNA sample for comparison with the semen samples recovered from Wanda's body. The results revealed that he was not responsible for her murder. However, no physical evidence retrieved from the bodies of Colin or Mainza exists for comparison with Termini's DNA.
It's the cat hair.
It's the cat
It's the cat hair. That's odd
hair.
when it was
Right.
on two of the young girls.
All right. Our next suspect is Kenneth Bianchi. He was an ice cream vendor in Rochester and is known to have worked locations close to where the first two murders happened. He moved to Los Angeles in January 1976, and between 1977 and 1978, he and his cousin Angelo committed the Hillside Strangler murders of 10 girls and young women between the ages of 12 and 28.
Jesus.
Kenneth was never charged with the murders of the three young girls, and he has denied any culpability in the murders. He's repeatedly made attempts to clear his name. However, he was known to have driven a vehicle similar to the make and color as the one seen near the abduction sites. And then the last one I have is Joseph Nasso. He was a 77-year-old man who murdered 4 women in California between 1977 and 1994. He was suspected because each victim's surname began with the same letter of her first name, and he was initially a person of interest, but DNA testing was not a match against the semen sample. So he was actually brought to trial for his crimes in 2013, and he was sentenced to death in November 2013 for the California alphabet murders. So there is actually a movie that was released, which is called The Alphabet Killer. If you would like to look into that, there's also 3 books available. And the Discovery Channel also did a 45-minute episode on the
Yeah.
alphabet murders as well.
It
Yeah.
was it was a pretty wild case, like covered to an extent.
All right. And there's many similarities. Like all 3 of the girls were just young pre-adolescents who disappeared from Rochester in the early afternoon and apparently on days of light or heavy rain.
Which is that one's an odd, like,
Coincidence or
yeah, like, I guess you could say it's a coincidence, because how the hell do you predict that?
right?
Like, that's the one thing that threw me off.
Yeah. All of their bodies were discovered in nearby towns and close to an expressway at a location that was typically accessible by vehicle, and each were short in height, had been raped before being strangled to death, and the bodies of both Michelle and Wanda had been redressed. So the investigators thought that the possibility of each victim being selected due to their initials was extremely unlikely. This was because for an offender to pre-select his victims, um, he would probably like that would involve him stalking them, and they think that if he was stalking his victims, he would have been seen, which I don't necessarily think is true.
I don't
But
I don't either, really, because in all honesty, it could literally be someone from their school. It could be someone I read it somewhere, it said it could have been the mailman. It was a Reddit thread. I cannot remember what it was for the Reddit thread, like the username, but they had suggested it could be someone like a mailman who would know first and last names on
Mhm.
things, which that one made sense to me. So if it was like a commonly known person in the community, or just not even like commonly known, just someone working in the community could have easily figured out first and last name initials matching, like a pharmacist.
Yeah. And what sucks is that even if someone else had killed Carmen and then the same person killed Michelle and Wanda, like the
Yeah.
police think, it sucks because there was no DNA obtained from Carmen. The uncle's dead, so even if they exhumed him for samples, they wouldn't be able to compare it because,
Yeah.
well, and then she's the only one who didn't have white cat fur on her body.
Yeah. Like it's and she was killed like early. So it's
Yeah.
like you've got the one girl first murdered, and then you've got the other two together, and they do the MO does match the
Hmm.
two more, like with the cat hair, the redressing. So it's like it's just odd, but it's also like a lot of murderers do change their MO as they start to kill more and adapt to what they start to unfortunately like. They can change their MO, which can
Yeah.
also throw off investigators because if they start one way and they realize that's not working, they flip to another way.
And then some people just do that so that they throw people off of their trail. Like they do it intentionally. So,
Exactly. And back in the day, in the 70s, I mean, I'm sure investigating properties were better than they were in the 50s, but they weren't as good as they are now.
no.
So it's not even like they had all the things they would need to fully do this
And
extensively.
and now there's not as many people working the case, so
It's an unfortunate case that's unsolved. I hope it never just goes to a cold case. I do hope that they find who did this,
yeah.
but it's hard. It's unfortunately one of those really hard cases.
Yeah.
And it's sad. It's really sad.
And to make it more sad, Carmen's mother actually made a statement and she said, I could die knowing who killed my Carmencita. I could die more peacefully than I have lived. It is the only thing I want in my life to know that this person had to pay for the terrible things he did to my little girl. If the person who did this could have any compassion, he would see the pain and suffering the families of these little girls have gone through for all this time.
That's sad. Like that has my that has my
You're not
tears.
supposed to
Like
bury your child. Like,
no.
it's just,
No. And that's sad. That's so freaking sad. This whole case is sad. It's young girls. It's sad. And to have that quote from a mom. Come on now.
right? And then, actually, more recently, in 2009, the Democrat and Chronicle newspaper published a series of articles focusing on the police investigations, resulting in about 20 new leads. But again, unfortunately, none of these resulted in the apprehension or conviction of the perpetrators or perp. And then the RCPD, like the Rochester RC, no, RPD, Rochester Police Department, they remain committed to solving the case. And that is the last update that I have.
Yeah. And I hope they stay committed because that family, all those
Families,
families
yeah,
deserve to know and have justice for their children because it's sad to not have, and you're uneasy for all these years not knowing who did it, or like it's just it's an uneasy, you're sad, it's horrible.
right. And then, yeah, I just couldn't imagine. It's just sad.
No, it's very unfortunate.
Which this brings me to our final question. Do you think, you as the listener, that it was two different people, or do you think it was the same person who committed all three of these crimes? If you're listening on YouTube, you can leave a comment. If you are listening on another streaming platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, there's this,
Anything.
Samsung,
Anything and everything.
anything. You can leave a comment on our Instagram page. We will be posting
Comment on
any.
our YouTube. Let us
Send
know
us a
your thoughts
message,
on this case.
DM us.
Yeah.
Let us
We'd
know.
we'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear your opinions on it.
Yeah. And while you're at it, um, don't forget that you can submit your spooky ghoul.
Yeah.
Okay. While you're at it, don't forget that you can submit your spooky stories on Ghoul Talk. The link is in the description. And then you can also leave us a review. We would greatly
Please.
appreciate it. Please. Yeah, thank you for listening. And remember to keep it spooky. And we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.